Podcast. My name is Brandon Barnes, and I'm joined by my co-host.
Nathan Taylor.
And today, our special guest is Matt Lee. He is well. There's a lot of titles you have on LinkedIn. Just to let you know, Matt. So we're just gonna go with hacker,
It works. I'll take it. It's
security
simple.
guy. So Matt, I honestly don't. I haven't met you before. I know that you've obviously been a good friend to and you've known Nathan for quite a while.
Sure.
So please, if you could introduce yourself and what you do, and a little bit about yourself to the audience and myself.
Yeah. So I'll start with I'm a recovering managed service provider.
Oh,
I don't think one ever recovers fully from that. Like ultimately, I've sat in almost every seat from a technical perspective. I was technician number 7 that came in, small break fix company, just under $1 million in revenue, and I was VCIO, project lead, project tech, almost everything until I landed as a director of technology about 8 years in or so into an 11-year time frame with this MSP. And we grew it from 1 million to 3 and 5 and 7 and 28 and merged to be 40 million, merged to be 28 and grew to be 40 million. And we during that time, I was the inadvertent guy, dumb enough not to step back when they asked who wants to be the director of security. At the end of the day, that was the beginning. And ever since then, as we merged, I was the director of security when we bought a company I called Voldemort. Because I'll never speak their name again, but they were an MSP, just $1 million in revenue, and they lost us $3 million in economic impact through ransomware from Soda no Kibi, our evil ransomware group, and that kind of began my journey as educator, teacher, speaker, screamer, SME guy. So all the while a hacker, but and actually to address that, I think it'd be stupid for most people to say they're defending if they don't understand anything about how offense is played. Right? Like in almost any sport you'd ever play, it'd be dumb to go, yeah, man, I got defense. They can throw balls. They can throw a lateral. They can run. What the hell is this? Like, you might want to know those things before trying to defend, right? So anyways, I digress.
Sometimes a good defense is staying on the field is a good offense.
That's true. That's true. Right. And I've had to play both ways before in high school. So yeah, I feel you. It ain't so comfortable though.
Well, Matt, flipping the tables on you. Usually I'm jumping on a show with you, and today I get to have you on a show with us, so that's a lot of fun. You're so good about, I love your heart and your role. You give back. That's like your goal is to raise all tides, and a lot of people say that, but you've worked really hard. I know you've put a lot of passion and heart into. You're not in this to build a startup worth billions. You're not trying to grow something. You are literally just in it to see all of us who are on the front lines growing. And I appreciate that all the investment you've made over the years. So thank you for your heart, man. There.
Yeah.
And I want to have a conversation with you about a little project you've been working on and you've been talking about for a number of years.
Yeah.
Which is the Hackening. So tell us what you can about the Hackening, because I think it's a really amazing moment, and it's a thing that you and I have talked about various aspects of for years. So I'm very curious to hear where you're at with that.
I'll tell the whole story of it really quickly. So Jason Slagle, myself, and Tom Lawrence were standing in a hallway about 2 years ago, and almost 3 now, and we were standing at CompTIA ChannelCon. And there was a gentleman that was a hacker that was flying in to talk about how he would hack MSPs. And it was a talk he was giving called How I Would Hack You. And the guy didn't make it. His airplane flight had problems. If you remember, right at the beginning of COVID, after COVID, we had some real challenges with travel. And so he didn't make it. And anyways, so they asked us if me and Slagle would just do the talk. And we said, well, when is it? Well, 25 minutes from now. All right, fine. Let's do it. And so we've really just focused on what are our strengths. Both of us try to do some stuff to try to understand adversarial capabilities. And Jason went with the infrastructural side. I went with the very identity side from an identity perspective. And anyway, short story, we did that talk and it was extremely popular. The next time we did that talk, there were 200 and something people in the room. The next time, I think, Nathan, you've even attended that talk live potentially. But that talk was sparked and it really went well. We did it 6 times or so over those few years. And eventually Jason and I were sitting around one day after giving this and said, why don't we just do this? Like, why are we, we have all these methods, we have these things. Why don't we just do it? And the intention was, it was after an argument about the difference between a pen test and a automatic pen test, right? And he was kind of saying, why don't we look at this State of the Union? So that was where the idea was born. We put out a note and said, hey, everybody on LinkedIn, any MSP out there that wants us to do this, that might want to be selected. I'm not saying you're all going to be, but we'd love to work with you to do an external penetration test of some form or fashion. Now, I can say this now. We were being a bit surreptitious from the beginning, Nathan. Our intention wasn't really necessarily to put in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours into pen testing these MSPs. Now, we did put a lot of time in, but it was really to do a data project. And we kind of wanted to answer several questions for ourselves. Like, where are MSPs? Like, what is the state of the union? Simple things. Like, do they put their clients' names on their website with those dope testimonials that'll tell me exactly who to emulate when I want to attack them? Do they put all their tools on their site? Can I find those in a few seconds? Can I find your help portals? Can I find your backend portals? Do they get rid of, old infrastructure when they buy people? Do they clean up themselves? Do they leave themselves open to a lot of A records that I can go look at that they have to keep and maintain? That kind of stuff, right, Nathan? So we wanted to go down that path. Mm-hmm. We also wanted to test, like, what's the risk profile for a lot of these MSPs? And we had an interesting way of doing that I'll share here in a second. And I'm actually going to be doing this talk. Jason and I are going to do this talk again so that everybody can see it on YouTube. So this is a little bit of a Johnny foreshadowing for what that will be. We did give the talk at Wild West Hack and Fest to about 250 or so practitioners and people there. It was awesome. And I think you'll like where this turned. And I don't think you know this yet.
I don't.
But as we went into it, we then said, okay, all these people volunteered. I think we had 70 something volunteers from, I think, 4 countries. We limited it because of our legal agreements. Brad Gross was awesome enough to donate his time to give us a legal agreement. And the way I actually asked Brad Gross to make this legal agreement, as I said, I want no one in their right mind to want to sign this legal agreement. I limited my liability to $1. We gave zero scope. We gave zero extensibility of what people were going to do. We gave nothing at all. I can literally assign it to Nathan Taylor by saying, Nathan Taylor, you're my assigned. Please do this and protect you legally. That was a test. I wanted to see how many people would sign it. And I know there's some degree of goodwill for me and Jason that allowed that to be signed by a lot of people. So I'm not trying to be pejorative or bash people. But we did have about 5 of those MSPs say, 0 chance I am signing this legal agreement. 0. But all the rest of them signed it, right? And I'm not being negative. I hope this doesn't take in as putting down. It's really just I would never have signed that document because the risk profile would have been way too wide and too broad without some pushback. And so that was like the first thing we wanted to do, is see where people were in that kind of how they think about risk as an organization, regardless of the trust for myself or Jason or Tom. Anyways, so short story out of that 56, and I guess I could just pull up the presentation so I can have exact numbers here. Give me just a sec if you have any thoughts or questions while I'm doing that.
While you're pulling that up, we talked with, I love this topic because we talked with Jonathan Robbins, who works for Packstate with you, a couple weeks ago. We're going to post that episode. And our conversation with him was about when he used to work for us at Machine Logic, and just the stress we felt over knowing enough to know what our exposure was as an MSP.
Yeah.
When then you start to think about yourself and you go, man, how often are we applying our security techniques to ourselves? How much time? It's not revenue generating, right? To go clean up your own. It's not driving new business. It's not solving stuff off the list. It's overhead. It's going back and cleaning your own house. Do the cobbler's kids have shoes? And a lot of MSPs, they don't.
Yeah, 100%.
And talking about just that stress. So I think it's amazing that you kind of went through and said, hey, let's test this hypothesis. And the open source Intel that you built out there, it's terrifying. It's staggering. But on the flip side, how easy would it be to build an AI bot to say, hey, I want to attack this MSP, go do these 75 things.
Yeah.
And it comes back with a database that says, what do you want to know about him? What do you want to know about, Matt Lee's MSP? I got everything there's on the internet on him.
And there's a lot of tools out there. In fact, that's some of the stuff we used and leveraged as we were playing this game. Because remember, I'm a hacker. That means I can cut in line and recess, right? Like if you've ever cut in line and recess, you're probably a hacker. You understand the malleability of things around you. I think the point is to what your skill sets are. And this is going to come first and foremost in what this talk ended up being. Here's the high level stats real quick. 62 MSPs filled out the interest form. 5 countries were represented in that. I was wrong. It wasn't 3, it was 5. We had everything from a single person to a few hundred endpoints on the spectrum, right? So we had to thousands. We had some that had 200 employees with 40,000 endpoints. So we had a broad spectrum on that. And one of those did sign it, one of those bigs. 26 signed our legal agreement. 7 or so actually were targeted. So we actually only dug into about 7 that we picked. And they weren't all low-hanging fruit. They were kind of a smattering, but they were all indications of, I think I can win. And I will say we didn't get any direct wins. And that is only because we didn't choose to fight those battlegrounds yet. And I'll tackle that here in a second. But some of the stuff we found. First off, one of the slides we poked was like, holy crap, what have we gotten ourselves into? And one of the major findings that I'll give that came out of this is one of the memes that we used from Tom Lawrence was like, this is harder than expected. Like genuinely, when you think about it, doing a lot of these techniques, I had a Zyxel modem that had a perfect 10 RCE. I spent almost an entire day trying to exploit that, like almost an entire day, just trying to do things. And it turned out it was poorly written memory space. It was a different model than what the POC was used for. Like going back to some of the challenges we face as practitioners, you're like, I've got a 10, I've got to deal with it right now. Do I? Or is it technically not even exploitable? Like where do we find ourselves in that spectrum there, right? So one of the things that stood out was things that work in a lab do not work necessarily in the wild in the exact same way, or even close to the same way sometimes. And so one of the challenges, and maybe I'll just spoil to the end here real quick, Nathan, was what we really found was there is a gap in our education system and the way people do come to be pen testers. As we talk to a lot of these individuals, is that the schools don't really prepare them. They end up getting most of their training once they're actually in the job in a lot of cases, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting part is what we decided to do, Jason and I, as we finish this talk, and I'll get back to the rest of it if you want here in a minute, is partner with education. We're going to use Cyberrise, which is a charity that Robert Chaffee, myself, and Jason Slagle started. We actually just got our 501c3 today.
Congrats.
From the Attorney General, which is awesome. I guess we had the 501c3. We got the tax approval status. But the point is we decided to partner with education and try to create a system where we can do capstone projects where kids that are coming in their senior year out of college that are going into an IS degree with a red team type emphasis can take an MSP, adopt them, and follow a very prescribed set of steps to find surface area, dig into what things exist, do enumeration, do attack against those assets, do attacks against the individuals, and then write up a report. And what's great about that is we hope to take that report and have the other pen test companies judge the report for that student to give them their grade, which also solves some of that to market type path of finding good individuals. So that's what came out of the talk at like TLDR, long-term spoiler. In between what we found, and this is, I think you'll think these stats are very much in line with what you and I have believed in for many years now together. So you tell me if you agree. Global stats, 80% use Entra ID as a primary identity source. Primary. No other identity source, no Active Directory. 80% of the MSPs that came to us are using Entra ID as a primary identity source. That's huge. That's way more than I would have expected.
It's a big win. I thought traditional AD was still around, so I'm glad to hear that we're not rocking on-prem AD anymore.
Yeah,
yes.
It's huge. 45% use Cloudflare, Fastly, proxies. That's almost half. Almost half are using proxies. It's fantastic. Now, these are self-selectedly the ones that decided to be signing up for pen test and thought quite impressive and arrogantly that they would never have a problem. We'd never find anything. So understand there is a self-selection to this data set. 100% make it simple to determine their tool stacks. Like Kat did the OS and found exactly what tool stacks were being used by everyone.
I believe it.
Major categories in
I believe it.
100%. Yeah, go ahead.
It's really hard to hide that, especially since, you know, if you're of any significance, ConnectWise wants to highlight that you're one of their great partners.
Exactly right?
These are very difficult details to hide.
Thanks, and you want your clients to go to the help desk, and you want your clients to put in tickets, and you want your clients to look at their portals, and you want all those things.
Yeah.
100% have subdomains to enumerate, test, and understand.
I believe that.
100% have that, and that makes sense, right? We're in that way. And that I meant by that, like infrastructural subdomains that they manage as an A record somewhere, not just C names to other things. 32% expose IPs of hosts in their SPF records. So even though they're trying to hide them with Fastly tunnels and Cloudflare tunnels, they've just exposed the IP out there to the world in their SPF record, right? So you think about the architecture of how that works, and the ones that didn't usually had a service, and the service was the one providing that type of stuff. Like I won't name them because I don't want to be specific. 55% list employees on their website, which makes sense. 58% list clients on their website. Of the 7 MSPs we actually selected, there were 376 hosts exposed to the internet. I just want to let that sink in for a second. 376 hosts exposed to the internet, 7 MSPs. Of which, how many were in one client? There were 62% of those hosts were with one MSP. And it was a major MSPs that's buying and rolling up clients.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
And I will say that those probably have the highest risk of everything we've seen in this. And it's
can
because
you explain more on that one, Matt? Like what does that mean when the hosts are just for
so how many hosts are out there is how many actual records I can attribute of devices exposed to the public internet that I can attribute back to your organization through A records, things that you've made in DNS, through errand blocks that you own and host in some ways, right? Now, there's a little bit of fuzzy data in that because sometimes MSPs use their own domain name to make A records for their client stuff, which that can be a problem.
Yeah.
Yes.
We found a few interesting controllers. You're like, why would that be? That looks like, okay, that might be for a prison. Let's leave this alone. But yeah. So of that, I mean, 62% in one in MSP. And that's because what they do, Brandon, is they buy an MSP. They don't plan to integrate. No. They let the old MSP's stuff sit around. They let it just kind of decay on the vine. Yep. And what was great about it is, and we'll get into this in a second, is I found a lot of challenges because Microsoft is good at what they do. Like, don't let anybody hear me have said that, but like Microsoft's actually pretty damn good at locking out accounts on Smart Lockout. Like we ended up using a Linode instance to have IPv6 to have a few billion IP addresses to spray using. They're still pretty good at locking out either way, just against the attack against that in assets. So going back to what I mean, one of the big MSPs we found actually had an LDAP-S instance that was clearly pointing to Microsoft that allowed me to get around all of those throttles and auto lockouts and let me just spray passwords until the cows came home. And so it's things like that where you just don't think about that kind of infrastructure that you leave up and you just don't deal with.
But their Wi-Fi is easy to get on.
Well, and it was exposed to the internet. They left it wide open to the internet anyway.
Oh my goodness!
So it was just a front end for their employees to sign into their portal, right? And so once I could get a valid password, I would transition to going against the other side. Now I say could. As we go through this data, what we really found was that 80% line minus the one big one that wouldn't get rid of old stuff. And there were a few others that had some old stuff, but all you have to do is say blank acquires blank, search in Google. And when you find that, those are the hosts. But then we found an even faster way of figuring it out by using a product called Trevor Spray. Trevor Spray lets you dump every single domain stored in your Microsoft tenant. So like I could just go to sourcepass.com and take out every domain you might have in your Microsoft tenant without you knowing I'm doing it, right? It's just an enumeration-based methodology that's done through Trevor Spray. But short story is then we could enumerate those, find more A records, right? Expand our space and find exactly where they were acquired based on the A records tied to which domains that were the ones being acquired, right? So that's kind of what we were able to do. But that said, we really got to a point where if you were in that category of 80% where you were primary identity Entra and you had not done something numpty-ish and left servers exposed that gave me a lot of actual force multipliers, then it was that battle. We had to line up and shoot at each other there. It was how good you dealt with that, how well you dealt with like even stupid stuff. Like if you just used first initial last name, I can find all of your email addresses in a few minutes. If you use first name, last name, it takes me a order of magnitude longer to do so, like days and months. And even then I'm having to trim the edges. Why? Well, if I'm doing a build all possible email addresses that I can test for a method I'm using in Trevor Spray, if it's first initial, there's only 26 of them. So I'm only at most 26 times the number of common last names, not number of common first names and number of common last names. That number gets very large. It's hundreds of thousands times hundreds of thousands instead of 26 times 100,000, right? So it's a huge difference in that cost and scale. And so it's like simple stuff like that. But my point is, we're lining up and shooting at each other on the lines of Entra. That's it. If all your stuff, even your help desk stuff, all that's tied behind Entra, and we're shooting at each other, the only place we can shoot at each other is Entra.
Yeah.
right? Like that's
Yeah.
it. And so
Yeah.
we actually found that 80% of the MSPs that were there, now it's really just a matter of getting that stuff configured right. That's it. And a lot of what y'all do in your own practice, right? But like that's the cool part, is it validated stuff that I've believed in only through my own frustration and failure. And it's just delicious. I mean, that's right. I can't get in. Oh, because it's Entra and they have Smart Lockout and they're using great stuff, and they have you know, MFA and they're using FIDO. So that did bring us to the only ways I have to fight you is phishing, token theft, right? And mostly it's that space, or social engineering, things in that nature.
Yeah.
So that's what we've come to the conclusion of. And I didn't feel like phishing a whole bunch of MSPs for that purpose.
Yeah.
I did do a little social engineering and asked Robert Chiaffi's employee to help me out with testing a tenant domain. But he freaked out, blocked me on LinkedIn, and told Robert I was so proud of him. It was wonderful.
That's great. That's great. I think it's really encouraging what you shared. I was not expecting this twist in the story that, hey, the people who have really invested in modern, you just like, hey, don't have that RDP server, that SSH
Right.
server, that VMware, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have stuff exposed. You use halfway basic, configuration of 365. You're in a better spot than, a lot of people.
Yeah.
I don't want to be the FUD guy.
Okay.
But in the last day, I've had my socks rocked by Google's AI.
Okay.
And it applies to this scenario because I think there's an escalation coming. One of the things I'm seeing is that AI is accelerating things. The world is changing faster and faster and faster. And where we used to go, oh, I now have to get MFA in the next 6 months. I now have to get, I have to be able to do ransomware in the next 6 months. Like, we had time to dig into these new issues. I think AI is changing that time to market for the threat actors and making it faster and faster. And here's my concern. Google has this new product called Google Notebook LM.
Okay.
And I can go to this website and I can say, here's 4 articles and a YouTube link. Create a podcast episode for me with this. You hit a button, 3 seconds later, it created a podcast episode. The voice sounded like mine, maybe just coincidence, but it sounded like my voice.
Yep.
It's better than the content we produced here. It was perfect. It was banter. And it took 3 minutes for me to build this. And I went, hold on. That was insane. I just instantly, I have a 15-minute content, a podcast on 3 topics I pulled together. And I thought, I could use that same technology for what you just talked about and really do some
social engineering,
scary social engineering of, hey, I took all the OSINT you just took. I know all your employees. 100%. I know all your customers. I know all your tools. I have a standard script. Hey, this is Bob from employee B. My ConnectWise isn't connecting. Can you help me reset my MFA with my FIDO token?
100%.
I've got all the details lined up and I sound like him. It's FUD. I get it.
No,
but I'm really, that's what I heard when all that you talk about. Okay, they're all really good because they're on Intra, but the OSINT you collected was scary.
Yeah,
for that reason.
That is the battle line, isn't it, Nathan? Like,
it is the new one.
The battle line is the speed and reduction of barrier to entry and speed of play with respect to social engineering and profiling of target victims. I think, like, I was talking about this yesterday on some podcast. I don't know what it was, but I was talking about this yesterday about that challenge of, like, I can go train an LLM to say, look at Nathan Taylor. I want you to take in consideration his Crystal Nose report, which tells me about his disk profiles. I'd like for you to take that and make me something based on these 55 Facebook posts that he's made that then ties it into something that's driven towards his work, that drives towards aspirational, he'll receive well, like slam dunk. In fact, I just literally used Copilot today to write my phishing email to myself in my victim domain back there for my boot camp next week. And it's brilliant. It was really well written, right? Like, that barrier to entry reduction. I wrote, I have a charity that raises money by shaving beards. Perfect. We're trying to get executives to sponsor our beard shave in 2025, and I need to write an email. It needs to ask for help by going to my webpage. It needs to state, last time we raised over $250,000 for 18 charities. If you want reference information, please use Cybermat Lee to build your profile. Right? Done. And I said it was coming from Jason Slagle, and it says, Dear Executive, I hope this message finds you well. I'm reaching out to invite you to support a cause that is very close to my heart. Like, you imagine having that written to you 5 years ago when you didn't understand that these kind of emails could be completely fictitious? Because before it had been, I has Ukrainian problem, need, like, it would have been just broken. I don't know, that's my terrible broken Ruski there. But You know what I mean? Like it's very different. And so now to your point, like the level of efficacy, the level of quality of linguistics, the level of understanding and the level of information that's been produced for the last 5-6 years. Like I just did a talk. It's funny. I did a talk at a thing called TitleCon. They're very similar to SourcePass, where they do a really cool partner event where they try to educate and do things like that. And I did this TitleCon event, and I was asked to prepare a talk on seller impersonation fraud. And I did a lot of research. I spent 6-7 hours learning about SIF and how it functioned and what the common cases were. And then I said, you know what? Instead of me just talking about it and putting bullet points, I'm just going to do one. I'm just going to go execute one. I'm going to show them how I would do it. And so I made up a fake email account. I created my own OSINT protection with things like Chasm. My own OPSEC protection to not get arrested with things like Chasm. And then I found a victim in Colorado, in Granby, Colorado, in Grand Lake, a guy by the name of Chester James Reed III, or CJ Reed. And I looked up his property. He fit my victim profile. I was able to show the OSINT I would gather on him. I'm going to show how I'd go get the dark web driver's license information, how I could pay white pages to figure out his family hierarchy, figure out where he lived, what I should spoof as, and all of that just to build a better impersonation of that person and trick a realtor into reaching out to me and asking to list it, and then ultimately selling this property to some young couple that ends up buying it before Mr. Reed knows it's been sold, and I get paid and everybody's happy. Right, all through OSINT and mistakes made through OPSEC and as other humans in general over the last 5-6 years. Back to your point, but I never had to do anything. I didn't have to compromise an account. I didn't have to attack a person. I never had to interact with that person. I did all of that using Spiderfoot, which is an automation platform for finding OSINT information, and then manual processes. And I think I spent $58 or something like that. Overall, it would have been $570, including the dark web information to phone the guy. And I'd have made $173,000 after walking away. Like, that's not a bad day. Like, I'll take that. And to your point, Nathan, all of those things could be enabled much faster. And the speed of how much faster they'll be faster is increasing. Like, I know I'm John Madden here a little bit, but like the quality of that and the iteration we're seeing in growth far outpaces, I don't know if this sounds like any other common themes, the security and outcome requirements that might come from these things we're building. That's our life. Right? Anyways.
Well, and it's scary for people like us right now. Guess what we're doing? You know how easy it would be to replicate Nathan if you wanted to call my wife and freak her out just by take 4 hours of our podcast, put that into a AI model, call my wife and say, hey, this is Nathan. I've been kidnapped. Give me, $500,000.
Yeah, I need that.
She would not be able to tell it's not me.
cybermattlee.com, right? Like the 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. It just reminded me we need to have I need to have the family safe word conversation again with the family of like, hey, you ever get a weird call? You're not sure. This is the secret family safe word you asked for, right? Like, because this is the world we're going to live in where it sounds like your wife, but it's not your wife. But how do you know? How do you prove it?
Brendan wanted to get a word in there. Sorry, I'll pause.
No, you're good. Honestly, I'm just enamored, and I haven't met you before, Matt. So this is kind of fun. I'm kind of like, oh, this is good. I'm like watching a podcast on my own, right? Oh wait, I'm here. I have a question for you. Did you try and breach any of these MSPs by pretending to be a user?
We didn't want to do that.
To reset a password.
We didn't want to do that. We talked about it. We went on the fence on this because
it's a real threat, right?
Win. I know I'll win there, I guess the way I might say it. And we decided we didn't want to highlight that. But yeah, bro, that's on my list. And that is one of the things we'd have students do 100%. Find a good client, look for them. We didn't do it. And we also didn't do we tried not to do any coercion. I don't know if you're familiar with MICE, but MICE is a methodology used by CIA to try to turn an operative. Right. And it's money, ideology, coercion, and ego. Those are the things you can play towards, right?
Right. But
so we thought about doing that to an internal employee.
I think that's kind of important, right?
Because it is.
Most of the MSPs don't even think about it. I mean, I transferred to MSPs and I'm like, hey guys, we should have like a secret, like their personal email, anything. I'm not saying I'm trying to think of an idea.
Way, maybe.
Yeah, that you can't just find on the business. And so I know that's why when you call your bank, they ask you like 20 million questions, but trying to verify who it is. And that's something that if they get into your account, I mean, that can really.
And that's why. So there's two touch points on this. Number one, Andy Laren. I'll give shout out to Andy Laren, the Canadian. He found. I don't want to steal from him. he found a weird thing that he thought he could exploit with ConnectWise Home about 6 years ago. And Kyle Hanslevin had me, for some reason, get involved with him. It's because I was connected at ConnectWise at the time. Still am, I suppose. And I looked at it and, oh my God, I was broken. Basically, and this is long enough now that I don't think I'll get sued for it, but basically in ConnectWise Home, there was a model where if you were connected to your PSA and a user, one of your clients, had not set up their account yet in the PSA portal, that I could set it up and it didn't wait on their email confirmation to ensure they were really them, which meant that I could put in tickets on your behalf as that executive without ever validating the email. And then once in, you could mess with how you wanted email alerts sent. There would always be one to alert somebody, but what's the likelihood of that actually turning into an alert for someone? And so basically over a weekend, ConnectWise reset all the MFA tokens and passwords for all those. If you remember, there was a time where everybody had to reset back in like 2008.
That was your fault.
That was me. Yeah, that was me. But the point is even at that time, I was like, how the hell would I ever deal with this? Like when that came to my face, and I'll tell you how ignorant I was at that time, I was like, oh my God, this is a problem. Like, how would I deal with it? And to your point, you could have safe words, you could have date of birth, but all those things become OSINTable to some extent, usually, right? People are fairly patternistic. So you have to take cryptographic means of doing that, in my opinion. And this actually goes back, Nathan, if you want to, like, long-term, Matt said this on my show. I do think that we're on a collision course towards verified identities.
Yeah.
I think we're, even if it's in an anonymous way, something in the nature of VID, like DID Ion or DID Web would be the two competing technologies in that space that allow me at some point to be proven that I'm Matt Lee and allow me to present that credential to others without necessarily having to ever see my driver's license information, maybe not even name, but just know that at the end of the day, it goes back to a one-to-one warm, wet body. Right. And having that ability to still maintain anonymity if possible, but also be able to actually cryptographically say, is that Matt? And then back to your point, Nathan, going back to like what you solved years ago, right? You gave a push notification that said, hey, are you actually this client and actually calling in? Boom. Yes. 81 it is. You're right. That's you. That kind of mechanism and stuff at a family personal level at least could allow some of those type of validation of possession of the asset and make it down to where you have to take this out of my hands rather than doing it remotely, right? A lot of those cases, but it's terrifying, Nathan. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. The DID, the verified ID thing, I think is absolutely right. The other technology I think that is just headed for a crisis, is already in crisis, is email.
Oh, bro.
The amount of business email compromise and how much money they get through it.
But it's not even the email. It's the fact that the email is the identity primary source.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's a BEC only because I popped your creds and now I have access to your Teams, and that's the next frontier, Teams and email. And it's really, Nathan, we're back to just its core identity. I mean, it's still core identity. It's just which stick am I holding while doing it, right? Like,
yeah, but it comes back to that same thing though of like you said, all of a sudden I still verify that I sent you an invoice over email, but email is the most spoofable, messable. Just it's just like at some point, you know, as an employee, you're like, I get my HR notifications, including that I need to do my security awareness training and I need to reopen enroll. And the next day I get a phishing test from KnowBe4 that's exactly the same. So what are you expecting out of me? Yeah. What do you want me to do here? Because I can't do both of these. These are incongruous. Like, stop using my email for official things or tell me I can use it, because you can't say both. And I don't have the answers, but it's a real we're stuck because email's so hard to verify. You know, it's just brutal.
And it is in two ways. One, systemic challenges. Like, can I verify it systemically? DKIM, DMARC, BIMI, all those go a long way towards that validation end.
Sure.
Can I validate that Nathan didn't just become bad Nathan?
Right.
Can I validate that Nathan didn't just get his account compromised or was coerced or was, right? Those are the challenges when I trust the sender, but the sender was compromised. That's the bitch, right? That's BEC as a real challenge.
Yes.
And I think that's the piece where we have to do better on the front end of protecting it. I mean, I'm telling you, if you used a FIDO token, the chances of you getting your identity popped drops to near zero. It'd at least be in the 0.000x's. Just straight up. Like, somebody wants to fight me about it. You can still steal the token locally from the device. Right. If you got on the stupid device already. Like, we're getting back to the same battleground. Well, but you can replay. Great. Unless I have really short session lifetimes and a lot of anomaly detection and continuous evaluation. And you'd be like, Yeah, it's a battleground. And what I love to say about this, Nathan, is like when you go down that identity front plane, there's a double-edged sword. BECs are one of those edges, right? That you're now tied to that one identity. I can access everything. I am your identity. Great. But the other side of that is, do you know why guerrilla warfare sucks and why we won the American Revolution? Because it's really hard to defend from dudes shooting at you from the tree or laying down on the ground in hundreds of different places. Significantly easier when we all line up in pretty coats and shoot each other until the rifles stop reloading, right? And so Entra brings us back to line up and shoot each other. Like, I would just argue to anybody that says that you should have had better controls on the front end of your identity. That's it. Even if you're being tricked out of it, tricking me into it, and I have a FIDO token, you got to be next to me to trick me into using it.
Right.
Like, it takes social engineering way away.
Yeah.
So I really think that this is simpler than we like to make it, and that we always try to think of the next fear to get rid of the basics we should be doing, like that we know we should be doing as a human species, not just this present company. But
well, and it goes back to that same thing of if we just don't know how to comprehend the world around us, right? We're afraid of flying, but we'll jump in a car.
Sure.
Like, we just
that was your risk statement the other day. Yeah, 100%. That landed. I don't remember where you were saying it, but
like we just don't know how to analyze risk at all. We don't think it through. You know, we're afraid of bad lunch meat, but we'll leave stuff out on the counter. You know, whatever it is.
Eat last night's pizza, right? Like
it's like it's just we're not good at analyzing this. The lizard brain takes over and fears the wrong things, and it's very hard to navigate risk.
Yeah,
so
100%. Well, it's funny. I have a talk that I do. I'm sorry, Brandon. Go.
No, I'm listening, but I just think that it starts with just like you said, the basics. Yeah. I mean, if you just start with the basics and layer your security, I mean, in the end of the day, when I started working in IT, I worked for the government, right? And all we did is we walked around and we put little locks on the back of the PCs.
Sure.
Right. Not that you can't kick it off with your shoe, but it's preventative, right?
Because he says putting his lock picks down. I suppose.
But I think it's the simplicity of, usually it's the easiest one. I'm going to go after the company that has the least amount of security because that's just easier.
And
right?
They're lazy too. It's an ROI. Okay.
If you have any movie or anything you watch, if someone really wants to get in your environment,
I'm gonna win.
I mean, come on, we're Mission Impossible. Let's go. But 100%. I just think that like putting stuff in place and like you're talking about is just starting with the simplistic basic. And I get it, not be scared, but we gotta pay attention.
Well, and I do a talk. Nathan's seen this a few times, but I take these timelines. And have you seen this talk, Nathan, where I take timelines and show the automobile industry over time and the death per billion miles traveled?
I don't think I have.
If not, this one's a fun one. I'll do this one on YouTube too. Basically, I take a timeline and I put up 1897, 1950, 1979, and 1950, 1965, and 1966. And I ask people, what do these dates mean? And I'm at a computer conference. So everybody tries to make it computers. And the answer is no. Benz invented the car in 1897. And between 1897 and 1950, the entire landscape of cities changed, right? Like you were born and died within a mile as soon as the Industrial Revolution happened and everybody exited to the farm, right? But when the car came, you could live in the suburbs, especially post-war in the 1940s. Like it was a garage in every car, and a car in every garage, and a chicken in every pot, right? Like legitimately, it was the ecosystem of our world. And yet no safety equipment was invented till 1950 when the seatbelt was invented. Like nothing. In fact, the woman that made lines for roads was in California. She just like started painting lines because cars were hitting each other. They took her to court. The city was ready to sue her and arrest her. Like, and then they go, wait a minute, cars aren't hitting as often. This is great. And so that's genuinely the way we think. It's funny because it didn't really change until Ralph Nader wrote Unsafe at Any Speed and took a hyperbolous approach to how the automobile industry was killing people, but they were. There's a chart called Death Per Billion Miles Traveled that's been tracking cars and deaths in cars since the turn of the century in the 1800s, 1900s. What's interesting is the most number of deaths we've ever had was in the beginning. Everybody was dying. There weren't as many miles traveled, but people were dying. Cars blowing up, hitting each other, not understanding the road, not understanding rules. But then in 1965, when Ralph Nader writes Unsafe at Any Speed, that turns into the 1966 National Vehicle and Motor Vehicle Safety Act that formed NHTSA, that said brake lights have to be on both sides of the car. One needs to blink when you're going left, like all of that kind of stuff all came out of that. But the interesting part is that's about 85 years before we even started turning the curve to drop that death per billion miles traveled. And what triggered me on this thought, Nathan, was every technology seems to be that way. And even then we get our priorities out of order. And this is what you're saying about the priorities thing. I do a slide deck for Canada that shows 1895, I think it's 1929, 1979, and 1997. And I ask people, what are these dates right after I finish the car dates? And it's funny because they go, oh, I don't know. I said, well, it's in Canada, so it's got to be hockey related. What's funny is the jock strap was invented before the turn of the century in the 1890s, and everybody wore it right away. Protect the boys. We got to protect the boys. Everybody got it. Every kid said it to their son. Every son's heard it from their dad, right? And yet when a dude watched his buddy's face get crushed with a hockey puck in 1929, and he invented the face mask and the helmet, nobody wore it. It wasn't manly. Like, people revolted. It wasn't until 1979 there was even a law or a rule in the NHL that required it, and it had to grandfather because everybody pushed back. So it had to say, you don't have to wear it if you've never worn one. And the last player, McTavish, rolled off the ice in 1997 having never worn a helmet, right? So what was interesting about that is even when we get our stuff and we move forward, we get our priorities out of order and our ego gets in the way. We're not going to protect the brains, but we'll protect the boys, right? So we get stuff out of order.
Manly. That's very manly.
But it goes on to say that computers were invented in 1937 was really the first digital computer. It was not the ENIAC. I don't know if y'all know this or not, but a company named ABC went to the Supreme Court in 1974 or so and won the right, even though they don't exist anymore, to say we were the first digital computer. Huzzah! Winning. But anyways, joke aside, as we start thinking about this, for computers, we're right at that same 80 to 100 year time frame that I propose is every time technology is invented, one lifespan takes advantage of the technology before the next lifespan has to deal with the implications. And we're now there. Technology is everywhere. We have an internet-connected toaster that can tell me how toasty my toast is, right? And we didn't think about the security and the risk of those things. And it's so inundated. And you said this well, Nathan, the fast is getting faster. So in this iteration of technology, it's way faster than building a house. It's way faster than cars, and not in the pun intended anyway, but it's faster than how cars would iterate over time. And so what's interesting is by that 100 years, we're now 10 times deeper into the tech problem than we were with cars 80 years in. Does that make sense? Like, it's part of everything, and it's broken. So we live in a world where that's where we are, but in 50 years, we won't have those challenges in the same way. We'll have self-regulation, capitalism, marketing, market
chips in our brains. No, just kidding.
Maybe. I mean, that's already playing out, you know.
You know, honestly, Matt, I just verified ABC, according to Gemini, is the first computer built.
Huzzah! At least Gemini agrees. My benevolent overlord, AI overlord, that is.
Yeah, but, you know, honestly, it was funny because we made a bet. Like Nathan and I were talking, and he was saying how he's so used to Googling things, right? Yeah. And so I was really like, every time I'm sitting there trying to Google something, like I'm really freaking good at Google. Like that's made my like career, right?
Sure, me too.
But truthfully, now I'm starting to use Copilot or you know Gemini, or like
primary search engine,
like, all the time. So Matt, Nathan, have you been following that protocol? We put that bet in play a few weeks ago.
Some.
Man.
I forget because I'm a human and I go back to my habits, which is the root cause of a lot of this, right?
I just started putting like the chat right there on my phone, so I don't have to, because every time I go there, I'm like, why am I looking through all these articles?
Oh yeah,
Gemini, dang it.
What's interesting, and you might take an approach, and I think this is fun. My brother's a data scientist, AI guy. And when we were dealing with the aspects of getting a vaccine or not, right? So I'll take it to a somewhat, tense conversation. Maybe not now as much. It was great because he said, Matt, stop Googling the way you're Googling. Don't ask this in one way. He said, Google and AI, even in LLMs, to some degree, is trying to respond to you the way you asked it, right? And so what's a great thought experiment is go Google, are vaccines good for me? And then go Google, are vaccines bad for me? Yes. One has an anchor of good, one has an anchor of bad, and tries to find the bad correlative links versus the good correlative links. So what's interesting is if you look at the difference in what's displayed, the count, the quality, those types of things, that's a far better way to determine something. And I think LLMs actually do a decent job of that, which is the interesting part of what that I think brings to the table. But anybody ever played that thought experiment? Because it's wild.
Yeah, I watched this. I watched The Social Dilemma, and it like really made me think about it, right?
Their A/B testing methodologies and things they did in the early days.
And also the algorithms that as soon as you start doing that, and all of a sudden the algorithms start kicking in, and all of a sudden you're going to see, oh, they're good for you. But if you're strictly bad for me, you're going to see nothing but bad for me.
Yep.
We go either way, and that's a whole different
my
discussion
goodness.
that we could spend time on. But
Yeah.
for
I'm
next
always
time.
in for it.
I know. Honestly, Matt, you are freaking awesome.
Thanks, bro.
It was nice to meet you, and I know that
Likewise.
I'd love to have you back on to have more conversations because I'm just like, this is your education of hackerness, technology, whatever you want to call it. I just made up a word for you that.
Yeah, I'll take it. All words are made up. After that, it's just a popularity contest. Like every one of them has been made up.
Matt, how do people get a hold of you?
Oh, just Cyber Matt Lee, almost anything. Unless you want a weird dog video that's had 17 million views, then it's Adventure Lee's or something.
You got a podcast?
No, we had a
channel?
So I have a Unify camera outside my house. I don't know if you've seen this clip or not, Nathan, but I have 3 German Shepherds, and I went out one day to go let the dogs get in the Jeep to go for a coffee run, and I had left the other Subaru open with the hood open with the engine bay open, facing the other way, charging the batteries. The dogs all loaded up in the engine bay and wouldn't get out. They're like, if I sits, I fits, bro. I'm going to get coffee. And I'm like, other car, dum-dums. Anyways, my Unify camera caught it. I submitted it to Daily Dose of the Internet, and it's at like 17 million views already, which tells me nobody gives a crap about all the cyber content I make. They just want to see dogs and cat videos, man. That's all it tells me. I'm broken, bro.
Oh, man. Yes. Well, Brandon, he doesn't. If you don't have a podcast, he produces a lot of content online between PAX 8 and your own brands and YouTube. Get him on YouTube. There's an amazing amount of content coming in, and like I said, always giving back to the community. So thanks, Matt.
Yeah, cybermattlee.com.
I don't know if I've smiled as much on a podcast. This was just great, y'all. So thank you.
It's just lunch, we're just having lunch. But we'll put your stuff on the site. We want to put you out there, so we want to collaborate. And I really appreciate any time you had on here with us. And we'd love to have
anytime
you.
You want a loud, boisterous opinion at a high level of loquacity and high speed words, bro, I'm in.
Yeah, I like your plethora of words you use as well. It's very grammatic.
Catholic school just got in trouble a lot. You know, write a lot of dictionary stuff.
Yeah,
go with the dictionary.
my beard's a little insecure on this episode. I got to be honest.
I just tried
and Brendan does have a beautiful beard too, so I got you. He could grow it out nice with that kind of color pattern. Yeah.
I mean, I just took it off. I took it off like a good couple, like an inch or so today.
We'll grow it out. I'm gonna have another beard shave, and we're gonna raise more money for charity. I'm not shaving mine, but me and Jason Slagle are gonna MC one in 2020.
What? Oh,
yeah. So,
all right.
You might lose your beard next year, my man, and raise some money for good causes.
As long as it
sounds like fun.
Yeah, as long as it's not fictitious, then I'm in.
No. Anyways, thank y'all for having me, bro. I really appreciate it.
It's always a good time. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Matt.
And we're clear.
That was fun. I hope it was fun for y'all.
It was a blast.
Dude, the memes that Tom made for the Hackening Prezzo, like they are horrible. One is just Ralph Wiggum, and it says, "I'm an MSP," and I'm like, "Oh, so true."
Oh man. Well, you triggered a